What if everything we know about our place in history is wrong? We like to think of ourselves as the first, the most advanced, the only civilization to ever shape this planet with industry, technology and ambition. But when you step back and look at the overwhelming scale of Earth's history, that certainty begins to crumble. The Earth is 4.5. Humanity has only existed for a fleeting 300,000 years, and modern civilization, the kind with skyscrapers, space programs and smartphones, barely 2 centuries. That's not even a blink on the geological clock, which means for billions of years before us, entire ages past that we will never fully see, entire stories written and erased by time. The unsettling question is simple: what if we weren't the first? Evidence exists all around us, though it often hides in plain sight. Ancient myths that describe gods descending from the skies, global flood legends that appear in cultures oceans apart, anomalies buried deep in the fossil record, chemical signatures in rocks that resemble the byproducts of industry. All of it raises eyebrows, but never quite answers the riddle. Even today, we are discovering traces that challenge our assumptions: unexplained isotopic ratios, mysterious artifacts, satellite images revealing strange patterns beneath ice sheets. Are these just coincidences of nature, or are they whispers from civilizations long vanished, erased so thoroughly by time that only the faintest echoes remain? The more you explore the idea, the more unsettling it becomes. Civilizations rise and fall. It has happened countless times in human history, and it may have happened countless times before humanity ever existed. If cities, machines, or entire empires stood on this planet millions of years ago, the Earth itself would have devoured nearly every trace of them, recycling their ruins into stone and sediment. The chilling possibility is that our story is not unique, but simply the latest chapter in a cycle far older than we can imagine. And if that's true, then the past isn't just history. It may also be a warning about where we're headed. When people talk about history, they usually mean the last few thousand years. The rise of Egypt, Greece, Rome, the dynasties of China, the civilizations of the Americas, and then the modern era that leads to us. But that view is painfully small compared to the true scale of Earth's timeline. To understand how much could be hidden from us, we need to stretch our minds beyond written history, beyond archaeology, beyond even the origins of our species, and look at the clock that truly matters, the geological clock of Earth itself. Our planet is roughly 4.5 billion years old. That number is so large it almost stops meaning anything. So let's put it into perspective. If the entire history of Earth were compressed into a single calendar year, with the planet forming on January 1 and today being December 31 at midnight, modern humans would only appear around 11:30 on December 3rd. Civilization, the kind with agriculture, cities and writing, would emerge at 11:59 and 58 seconds. And everything we call the modern world, the industrial age, electricity, computers, space travel, would exist only in the final heartbeat before midnight. Think about that. Entire continents moved, oceans rose and fell, whole species evolved and went extinct, and all of it happened long before we even arrived. The implication is terrifyingly simple. If other civilizations rose and fell in the deep past, they could have existed for millions of years and still be erased so thoroughly that we would barely know they were ever here. Time is both a creator and a destroyer. Mountains rise and crumble, rivers carve canyons, glaciers advance and retreat, and in that relentless cycle, almost everything humans build is temporary. Concrete crumbles in decades, steel rusts in centuries, even massive stone monuments like pyramids and statues eventually erode away in tens of thousands of years. And that's just the blink of an eye compared to the millions or even billions of years Earth has endured. If we disappeared tomorrow, how long would our cities last? Within a few centuries, skyscrapers would collapse. Within a few thousand years, forests and deserts would reclaim the ruins. Within a million years, tectonic shifts, erosion and climate cycles would erase almost everything. Plastics might linger, radioactive isotopes might remain, but the familiar symbols of our world, the buildings, the machines, the satellites would vanish. Now imagine trying to detect traces of a civilization not 1 million years old, but one that lived 10 million or 100 million years ago. The odds of finding intact ruins are nearly zero. The only clues left behind would be subtle, chemical changes in rocks, strange isotopes in the soil, odd fossil patterns that don't align with natural history. This is the scale of Earth's clock, and it shows us how fragile the traces of civilization really are. When we look at the fossil record, we see gaps everywhere. Entire ages come and go with barely a whisper preserved in stone. Species dominate the Earth for millions of years and then vanish, leaving only fragments behind. Even the mighty dinosaurs, which ruled for over 150 million years, are known to us mostly through partial skeletons and scattered fossils. If something as enormous and long-lasting as the dinosaurs can be reduced to fragments, what chance does a civilization made of fragile materials have of surviving across the same span of time? This is the unsettling truth of the geological clock. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Just because we haven't found ruins of civilizations older than ours doesn't mean they never existed. It may simply mean that the clock has erased them. What makes this thought even more compelling is how short our own story really is. Homo sapiens have only existed for about 300,000 years. For most of that time, we lived as hunter-gatherers, leaving almost no trace of our existence. It is only in the last 10,000 years that we began building permanent structures, and only in the last 200 years that we entered the industrial age. 200 years in a planet that is billions of years old. That's like a single grain of sand in an endless desert. If we collapse tomorrow, future archaeologists millions of years from now might look at the fossil record and see nothing unusual, maybe just a brief spike of carbon in the atmosphere, a scattering of artificial isotopes, and then silence. They might never know that a civilization capable of splitting the atom and reaching the stars once existed. If that's true for us, why wouldn't it be true for others? This is where the scale of Earth's time becomes truly humbling. Think of the Permian period, 250 million years ago, when life was flourishing in strange and alien forms, or the Cambrian explosion, over 500 million years ago, when life diversified into bizarre shapes that barely resemble anything we know today. In all those millions of years, is it really so impossible that intelligence rose more than once? We know that evolution doesn't follow a straight line. Intelligence has evolved independently in different lineages. Mammals, birds, even cephalopods like octopuses show remarkable problem-solving abilities. Given enough time, why wouldn't some branch of life before us have reached higher intelligence, perhaps even civilization? The geological clock gives them ample room to rise, fall, and vanish, long before we arrived. Another way to see it is through the scale of extinction events. Earth has endured at least 5 major mass extinctions, each wiping out the majority of life and resetting the evolutionary clock. The most famous, the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs, happened only 66 million years ago, but there were others. The Permian extinction erased over 90% of species. The Ordovician event wiped out marine life, and so on. Each of these cataclysms could have destroyed not just species, but civilizations if they existed. And afterward, Earth quietly rebuilt itself, covering the scars with new life. If there were intelligent beings before us, their stories would have ended in fire, ice, or poison, erased so completely that only whispers remain in the rocks. All of this leads to one chilling realization: the geological clock does not care about us. It has ticked for billions of years, and will continue ticking long after we are gone. Civilizations, no matter how advanced, are nothing but temporary guests on this planet, and time is the great eraser. We measure history in centuries, but the Earth measures it in eons. That mismatch is why we think of ourselves as unique, when in reality we may simply be the latest in a long line of civilizations to rise and fall. The fact that we see no obvious ruins is exactly what we should expect. The clock has been running too long, the eraser too thorough. And that brings us to the uncomfortable truth. If the geological clock allows for billions of years of hidden history, then our story might not be the first chapter, but the most recent. We stand on a planet that has recycled itself countless times, covering the scars of past ages. Somewhere in those layers of stone and sediment may lie the faint signatures of others who walked this path before us. We may never find them, or perhaps we already have, in the anomalies we dismiss as coincidences. Either way, the clock is still ticking, and it reminds us that our time too is limited. The real question is not whether civilizations existed before us, but whether ours will last long enough to be remembered, or whether we too will become just another erased chapter in Earth's endless calendar. If the Earth is billions of years old and civilizations could have risen and vanished long before us, then the best place to search for clues isn't in surviving monuments or scattered artifacts. it's in the very bones of the planet itself. The geological record is a time capsule, one that preserves snapshots of ancient environments, chemical traces, and catastrophic events. But like any archive, it is incomplete. Layers of rock compress, erode and fold, oceans swallow evidence, tectonic plates recycle the crust into magma, and yet hidden within those ancient stones are anomalies, signatures that don't quite fit with the natural order, patterns that suggest something more than geology at work. These anomalies are tantalizing because they hint at possibilities that stretch beyond what mainstream science is willing to entertain. One of the most compelling anomalies comes in the form of chemical fingerprints. When humans burn fossil fuels, we alter the balance of carbon isotopes in the atmosphere. Specifically, the ratio of carbon-12 to carbon-13 shifts in a way that is unnatural. This imbalance gets locked into sediments, ice cores, and soils, leaving behind what scientists call a carbon isotope excursion. Millions of years from now, if another civilization were to analyze Earth's rocks, they would find a sharp, unnatural spike at the exact layer where our industrial activity occurred. And here's the chilling part. We've already found such spikes in much older layers, long before humanity existed. During the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum about 55 million years ago, global temperatures spiked, oceans acidified, and massive amounts of carbon were suddenly released. Some explain it as volcanic activity or methane clathrates melting, but the patterns are eerily similar to what we're causing today. Could it have been a previous civilization burning fuel on an industrial scale, only to collapse under the weight of its own? Mainstream science says no, but the resemblance is haunting. Another anomaly comes from nuclear signatures. When humans split atoms, the process leaves behind unique isotopes, artificial ones that do not form naturally in significant amounts. These isotopes, like plutonium-244, have half-lives long enough to linger for millions of years, acting as breadcrumbs for future archaeologists. Strangely, some layers of ancient rock do contain unusual concentrations of isotopes, leading to questions about whether they could all be explained by natural nuclear processes. The most famous case is the Oklo phenomenon in Gabon, Africa, where uranium deposits went critical around 2 billion years ago, sustaining natural nuclear reactions for hundreds of thousands of years. Scientists say it was a natural reactor, but some researchers argue the conditions were so precise and efficient that it resembles engineered design. If a civilization had existed in that epoch, could Oklo have been their work, or at least a site they exploited? The official explanation leans toward coincidence, but coincidences this strange are exactly what fuels suspicion. There are also structural anomalies buried in rock layers, places where geometry seems too deliberate to be natural. Perfectly cut spheres, sometimes metallic, have been found in ancient mines in South Africa, reportedly embedded in rock dated to billions of years old. Skeptics argue they are natural mineral formations, shaped by geological processes we don't fully understand. But the fact remains, they are spherical to a degree that feels engineered, with grooves etched around their surfaces. If such objects are natural, they are extraordinary. If they are artificial, then they are evidence of something that should not exist in our timeline. Even the fossil record carries peculiar signatures. There are sudden disappearances and reappearances of species, massive die-offs that leave behind chemical traces suggesting rapid environmental change. In some cases, there are fossilized remains that don't quite match evolutionary expectations. Artifacts like the Cambrian explosion, where complex life seemed to appear almost out of nowhere. Scientists explain these events as evolutionary leaps, but if you tilt your perspective, they could also look like resets, periods where civilizations fell, life was rebooted, and new forms took over the stage. To imagine intelligence erased from those records is unsettling, but not impossible. The gaps in the fossil archive are wide enough to swallow entire civilizations whole. There's also the strange matter of ancient tools and artifacts reportedly discovered in geological contexts where they shouldn't exist. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, miners and geologists occasionally reported finding metallic objects or worked stone tools embedded in coal seams, or deep rock layers dated to millions of years old. Many of these reports are dismissed as errors, hoaxes, or contamination. Yet the consistency of such claims across different times and regions raises the question, are we too quick to dismiss anomalies because they don't fit our narrative? If even one of those discoveries were genuine, it would rewrite the history of humanity and of Earth itself. The geological anomalies don't stop with the ground beneath us. They extend into the atmosphere and oceans. In ancient sediment cores, there are layers rich with iridium, a metal rare on Earth's surface but common in asteroids. These are usually explained as evidence of impacts, like the one that ended the dinosaurs, but some layers show not only iridium, but also soot, glassy spherules, and other markers that could just as easily be interpreted as the fallout of massive industrial fires or even nuclear exchanges. The idea may sound far-fetched, but consider how our own activities will look to geologists millions of years from now. A thin line of plastic microbeads, a spike of carbon isotopes, radioactive dust from nuclear testing, a layer of strange alloys and synthetic compounds. This will be our signature. If we can leave such traces in a geological instant, then why is it impossible that others did too? Perhaps the most intriguing anomaly is how nature itself seems to mimic technology. Some mineral formations, when examined under a microscope, look like microchips. Crystals grow in geometric lattices that resemble manufactured designs. Stromatolites, ancient bacterial mats, create layered structures that look artificial until you understand their biology. Again and again, we see that the line between natural and artificial is not always clear. What if we have already mistaken artificial traces for natural ones? What if our own skepticism blinds us to the possibility that some of these so-called coincidences are, in fact, signatures left behind deliberately or accidentally by civilizations erased from memory? The deeper you explore the geological record, the more it feels like a palimpsest, a manuscript erased and rewritten countless times. Each era lays its words over the last, but faint traces remain beneath, waiting for someone to notice. The anomalies may not prove that advanced civilizations came before us, but they do prove one thing beyond doubt. Earth is full of mysteries we do not yet understand, and if the traces of our own civilization would look just as strange, just as out of place, millions of years from now, then the anomalies we find today may be the same kind of echoes, clues pointing to a story we are only beginning to glimpse. And that is the unsettling beauty of the geological record. It whispers without speaking, it hints without confirming, and it leaves us standing at the edge of a question that grows larger the more we ask it. If anomalies exist in the deep layers of Earth, then maybe they are not mistakes at all. Maybe they are fingerprints. And if they are fingerprints, then the question is not whether civilizations existed before us. It is how many times the story has already been written, erased, and written again. The fossil record is often presented to us as a neat and orderly timeline, a ladder of life climbing steadily upward through the ages. In reality, it is anything but neat. It is patchy, incomplete, and full of mystery. For every clear sequence of evolution, there are sudden gaps, abrupt appearances, and inexplicable disappearances. The fossil record is like a book missing most of its pages. What survives is a handful of scattered chapters, and from those fragments we try to reconstruct the entire story of life. But what if some of the missing chapters are not simply accidents of preservation? What if they represent entire eras of intelligence and civilization, wiped so thoroughly from existence that only faint and puzzling traces remain? One of the most striking puzzles is the Cambrian explosion. Around 540 million years ago, life went from relatively simple forms to an astonishing diversity of complex animals in what feels like an evolutionary blink of an eye. Creatures with skeletons, shells, eyes, and intricate body plans appeared suddenly, with few clear ancestors in the layers beneath. Scientists explain this as a burst of evolutionary innovation, perhaps triggered by changes in oxygen levels or genetics, but it raises an uncomfortable possibility. What if the sudden flourishing of life was not entirely natural? Could it have been nudged, influenced, or even reset by forces we do not understand, possibly by the remnants of an earlier civilization trying to restart life after a catastrophe? The fossil record does not give us clear answers, but the abruptness of the Cambrian explosion lingers as one of its most enduring mysteries. Equally perplexing are the mass extinctions. Life on Earth has been devastated at least 5 times in the last 500 million years, each event erasing the majority of species. The Permian extinction about 252 million years ago wiped out over 90% of all life, an almost total reset. Official explanations include massive volcanic eruptions, climate shifts, and ocean acidification, but some of the chemical signatures left behind in rocks, sudden spikes in carbon, unusual isotopes, mirror what we are creating right now through industrial activity. If geologists, millions of years from now, looked at our fossil record, they would see the same kind of anomalies. Could it be that past extinctions were not entirely natural, but the collapse of civilizations that once existed, pushing their planet beyond its limits until it could no longer support them? The possibility is deeply unsettling, but it cannot be ruled out when the fossil record itself is so incomplete. Then there are the out-of-place fossils, the ones that don't fit the expected timeline. Sometimes it is a fossilized footprint found in layers far older than humans should exist in. Sometimes it is a tool-like object embedded in coal seams dated to millions of years. Mainstream science usually dismisses these as misinterpretations, hoaxes or intrusions, rocks that were displaced, layers that were misdated. And often, that explanation may be correct, but if even a handful of these anomalies are genuine, they point to a history far stranger than we are willing to admit. A single hammer, a single footprint, a single artifact in the wrong layer could rewrite everything we believe about human uniqueness. The fossil record is full of these tantalizing anomalies, and while most are brushed aside, they continue to whisper that our history may be incomplete. Another puzzle is how intelligence itself appears in the fossil record. Dinosaurs ruled the Earth for over 150 million years, yet we tend to think of them as mindless reptiles. In reality, some species showed signs of remarkable intelligence. Troodontids, for example, had large brains relative to their body size, keen senses, and complex behaviors. Paleontologists have speculated that if they had not been wiped out by the asteroid 66 million years ago, they might have evolved into beings with intelligence rivaling our own. Imagine a lineage of dinosaur people building tools, shaping societies, perhaps even achieving something akin to civilization. If that had happened tens of millions of years ago, what traces would survive today? Almost none. Their bones would be scattered fossils, their cities eroded to dust, their technologies obliterated by time. The fossil record, with its vast gaps, would never reveal their true story. We would dismiss them as just another extinct species, never knowing what they might have achieved. The Silurian hypothesis, proposed by modern scientists, explores exactly this idea. If an industrial civilization had existed on Earth millions of years ago, would we be able to detect it? Their conclusion is sobering. The odds of finding direct evidence are vanishingly small. Fossils are rare, geological layers are constantly recycled, and artifacts degrade far too quickly. What might survive are indirect markers, chemical anomalies, isotope ratios, sudden warming events in the geological record. In other words, exactly the kinds of puzzles we already see in the fossil archive. The fossil record may already contain the evidence of lost civilizations, but because we are not looking for it, we interpret it as natural phenomena. Even in more recent eras, the fossil record holds mysteries that suggest forgotten knowledge. Take the case of ancient hominins. We know of Homo erectus, Neanderthals, Denisovans and other species that lived alongside early humans. Many showed signs of intelligence, using tools, controlling fire, creating art, and yet their stories ended abruptly, leaving only fragments of bone and occasional artifacts. Could they have achieved more than we realize? Could their knowledge and culture have been far richer than the sparse fossil record suggests? We assume they were primitive, but what if they left behind achievements that were erased by time, just as ours one day will be? The fossil record cannot capture culture, language, or memory. It can barely capture bone. Everything else is lost. This is the haunting truth of the fossil record. It is more absence than presence. For every species we know, there are countless others we will never find. For every trace we uncover, there are billions that have crumbled into dust. The story we tell ourselves about life is built on fragments, and the gaps are vast enough to hide entire civilizations. The fossils are not just bones, they are questions. They tell us life is ancient, resilient, and often surprising, but they also tell us how much we do not know, how much has been erased, and that is why the fossil puzzles matter. They are reminders that our version of history may not be the full story. They challenge the comforting illusion that we are the first, the only, the pinnacle of life's achievements. The sudden appearances, the abrupt extinctions, the out-of-place artifacts, the unexplained anomalies, all of them together whisper a possibility that is as thrilling as it is terrifying. Maybe others came before us. Maybe they lived, thrived, and fell, leaving only faint shadows behind. And if that is true, then the fossils are not just relics of the past. They are warnings about the future, They remind us that even the mightiest rulers of the earth can vanish, leaving behind only questions carved into stone. There are few things in our modern world more terrifying than the thought of nuclear fire. In a matter of minutes, entire cities can be reduced to ash, and within days, invisible radiation can poison soil, water, and air. It is the ultimate weapon of self-destruction, and its scars are written into our history, from the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki to the Cold War stockpiles that threaten to end civilization itself. But what most people don't realize is that if our civilization collapsed tomorrow, the traces of our nuclear era would outlast almost everything else we've built. Skyscrapers would crumble, satellites would fall, but isotopes, the chemical ghosts of nuclear reactions, would linger in the soil for millions of years. And when scientists began to study the Earth's deep past, they found strange chemical signatures that suggest we might not be the first to play with nuclear fire. These are the nuclear shadows of history, hints of technologies that may have existed long before it. One of the most famous anomalies is the Oklo natural reactor in Gabon, Africa. Discovered in the 1970s, this uranium deposit had once gone critical, sustaining chain reactions for hundreds of thousands of years, about 2 billion years ago. The mainstream explanation is that this was a natural reactor, triggered by the right balance of uranium concentration, water, and geology. And yet, some researchers point out how astonishingly precise the conditions had to be. The reaction zones operated with a consistency and stability that rivaled engineered reactors, leaving behind isotope ratios nearly identical to what we would expect from man-made fission. Was Oklo really a coincidence of nature, or was it a remnant of something far older, a civilization capable of manipulating nuclear power in an age long before humans walked the earth? Skeptics dismiss this idea, but the mystery remains. After all, natural reactors of this kind should be astronomically rare, yet here it is, perfectly preserved. The shadows stretch beyond Oklo. Across ancient rock layers, scientists have found unusual isotopic anomalies, plutonium-244 for instance, which does not form naturally in significant amounts, and should decay away quickly on a geological timescale. Yet traces have been detected, raising questions about whether they are remnants of cosmic events, like supernovae, or the fingerprints of something more deliberate. If an earlier civilization ever engaged in nuclear testing or warfare, the fallout would look much the same. Scattered isotopes locked in sediments, waiting to be discovered millions of years later. Imagine geologists in a future epoch, studying our time. They wouldn't find our skyscrapers or highways, but they would find the radioactive dust left behind by the bombs we tested in deserts and oceans. That thin line of isotopes would be our most enduring monument, a nuclear shadow stretching across the rock record. What makes this even more haunting is that some extinction events resemble the aftermath of nuclear catastrophe. During the Permian extinction, often called the Great Dying, nearly all life vanished. The causes are debated: volcanic eruptions, methane release, global warming. But some of the signatures look eerily familiar: rapid spikes in carbon, acidified oceans, poisoned air, scenarios we know could just as easily result from nuclear devastation on a planetary scale. If a civilization existed then and unleashed nuclear fire, their war would not only have destroyed themselves, but most of the biosphere, resetting the clock for millions of years. Nature would have rebuilt, covering their ruins, but the isotopic fingerprints of their folly could remain in the rocks we study today. The fossil record does not spell it out in human words, but the shadows are there waiting to be interpreted. There are also stories from human history, myths and legends, that eerily echo the imagery of nuclear devastation. Ancient Indian texts like the Mahabharata describe weapons that could burn cities in an instant, soldiers reduced to ash, survivors plagued by sickness and hair loss. These are often interpreted as poetic exaggerations or metaphors for natural disasters. But when you compare the descriptions to the effects of radiation poisoning and nuclear fire, the parallels are chilling. Are these merely coincidences of storytelling, or could they be cultural memories of something far older? Stories carried through millennia from a time when forgotten civilizations unleashed weapons beyond their control. It is impossible to prove, but the echoes are difficult to ignore. The truth is that nuclear shadows are the perfect markers of civilization. Unlike stone or metal which crumble and erode, isotopes remain, unchanging and undeniable. If we disappeared today, Our nuclear signature would linger for tens of millions of years, far longer than any monument or city. Future beings might never know our names, our languages, or our cultures, but they would know that a civilization once mastered the atom and left behind its radioactive fingerprints. By that same logic, if others came before us, we should expect to find their shadows in the rocks, and perhaps we already have, in anomalies we explain away as natural, but which could just as easily be technological. The thought is both thrilling and terrifying, because if nuclear shadows are the one true legacy of civilization, then they are also warnings. Every trace we leave is not just evidence of our existence, but of our potential to destroy ourselves. And if we find similar traces in the deep past, it may mean that others before us followed the same path, rising great heights, mastering power, and then erasing themselves in fire. The cycle would not just be biological, not just geological, but civilizational. The nuclear shadows are the scars left behind when ambition outruns wisdom, and they tell us that the story of intelligence on Earth may be one of endless self-destruction. And yet, there is another way to read these shadows. Perhaps they are not warnings, but messages. If earlier civilizations existed and knew they could not survive, maybe they left behind isotopic anomalies deliberately, knowing they would endure when everything else was gone. Maybe they hoped that one day another species would rise, find their fingerprints, and understand the lesson: power without restraint leads only to oblivion. In that sense, the nuclear shadows are not just scientific curiosities, but potential communications across time, voices from civilizations erased by the clock of Earth, whispering to us from their graves. Whether natural or artificial, accidental or deliberate, the nuclear shadows remain some of the most haunting anomalies in Earth's history. They force us to confront the fragility of our own place in the story, and they invite us to imagine that we are not the first to face the terrible choice between survival and annihilation. Perhaps we will be the first to choose differently, or perhaps we too will vanish, leaving behind only our own thin layer of radioactive dust, another shadow in the endless cycle of rise and fall. If there is one category of evidence that has haunted historians, archaeologists, and curious minds for centuries, it is the existence of ancient structures that defy explanation. Some monuments are so immense, so precise, and so advanced in their construction that they seem to belong to another world entirely. Whenever the topic of lost civilizations arises, these structures stand at the center of the debate, physical reminders carved in stone that whisper of knowledge we may not fully understand. While mainstream archaeology insists they are the product of human ingenuity within their historical contexts, others argue they could be echoes of technologies passed down from an earlier time, remnants of knowledge inherited from a forgotten age, or perhaps even fragments of civilizations that came before us entirely. Take the Great Pyramid of Giza. For centuries it has stood as a marvel of human achievement. Its stones, weighing tons apiece, were cut, transported and assembled with precision so remarkable that even today, engineers debate how it was done. The alignment of the pyramid with cardinal points, the mathematical relationships encoded in its dimensions, and the sheer scale of its construction raise questions that go beyond simple craftsmanship. Some argue that it was built purely as a tomb, while others believe it may have served as an energy device, an astronomical marker, or even something more advanced. Regardless of its purpose, it remains a riddle, because no written records explain its construction, and no comparable structure has ever been replicated on that scale without modern machinery. Could it be that the pyramid represents inherited knowledge, a memory of techniques developed long before recorded history, passed down through oral tradition until finally manifested in stone? And the pyramids are not alone. Across the ocean, in South America, the ruins of Pumapunku in Bolivia present a puzzle of their own. Here, massive stone blocks are cut with such precision that they interlock like pieces of a machine. Some stones have perfectly straight grooves and drill holes that seem to defy the crude tools attributed to the culture that built them. The blocks themselves are composed of andesite, a stone incredibly hard to shape, even with modern equipment. How then were they carved and placed with such exactitude centuries ago? Were the builders in possession of techniques or tools now lost to us? Or were they replicating knowledge preserved from a far older civilization that predated them by millennia? Similarly, the megalithic site of Baalbek in Lebanon contains stones so massive that modern cranes would struggle to lift them. Some of the blocks weigh over 1,000 tons, yet they were quarried moved and fitted into a foundation that remains one of the largest ever constructed. The question is not only how such feats were accomplished, but why? What purpose required stones of such enormous size? And how could ancient builders achieve such a task without technology that rivals or surpasses our own? These are not idle curiosities. They are anomalies that challenge our assumptions about the limits of ancient knowledge. We can also look beneath the oceans, where rising sea levels have swallowed entire cities. Off the coast of Japan, the Yonaguni Monument lies submerged beneath the waves, a massive structure of terraces, steps and sharp angles. Some argue it is a natural rock formation, the result of erosion and tectonic shifts. Others insist it is man-made, a lost city swallowed by the sea thousands of years ago. If it is indeed artificial, then it pushes the timeline of advanced human construction back far earlier than we currently accept, perhaps into an era when mainstream history insists humans were still primitive hunter-gatherers. And Yonaguni is not alone. There are rumored underwater ruins near India, Cuba, and elsewhere, structures that suggest the sea may be hiding evidence of civilizations lost when the last ice age ended and global waters rose by hundreds of feet. Even when not submerged, ancient technologies appear in the form of artifacts that seem far ahead of their time. The Antikythera mechanism discovered in a shipwreck off Greece is a prime example, dating to around 2,000 years ago. It is a complex system of gears designed to track astronomical movements with stunning precision. It has been called the world's first computer, and for good reason. It was centuries ahead of anything else known to exist in that era. The fact that such a device could be built and then forgotten, with no other comparable machines surviving until the Renaissance, suggests a cycle of knowledge being gained and lost. If such a thing could happen within the relatively short span of human history, imagine what could be erased in millions of years. Then there are the legends, stories of cities of gold, flying machines, and powerful weapons. Ancient Sanskrit texts describe vimanas, flying craft that could soar through the skies and even into space. The descriptions are detailed, sometimes eerily mechanical, and they raise the question, were these merely flights of myth? Or were they distorted memories of real technologies passed down from an earlier age? Similarly, the city of Atlantis, first described by Plato, has long been dismissed as allegory. Yet the persistence of flood myths and stories of great cities swallowed by the sea across countless cultures suggests a shared memory of civilizations erased by catastrophe. If these stories are echoes of real events, then perhaps Atlantis or something like it did exist, and its ruins now lie buried under waves and sediment. The most haunting aspect of these structures and artifacts is not simply their existence, but what they imply. If ancient builders could move stones weighing hundreds of tons, if they could carve granite with impossible precision, if they could create mechanical devices centuries ahead of their time, then what else did they know? What technologies have been completely lost to us, erased by time and disaster? We assume that technological progress moves in a straight line, always upward, always advancing, but history shows us that knowledge can be lost in an instant. Libraries burned, cities destroyed, traditions forgotten, entire sciences can vanish, leaving behind only rumors and relics. If this can happen in a few thousand years, how much more could be erased in a million? This brings us back to the unsettling idea that some of these structures may not belong fully to us at all. They may be inheritances, relics of civilizations long gone, preserved not in their entirety but in fragments we cannot fully decode. The builders of Pumapunku or Baalbek may have been using knowledge handed down from an era now erased, or they may have stumbled upon ruins themselves, adding their own layers atop something far older. If the Earth has hosted cycles of rise and collapse, then these monuments may be the faintest scars left behind, stubborn reminders that refuse to be erased entirely, and that possibility forces us to look at our own age differently. We imagine our skyscrapers, satellites, and computers as permanent testaments to our greatness, but in the scale of Earth's time, they are fragile, temporary, already crumbling. If our civilization collapsed tomorrow, within 10,000 years almost nothing would remain. Within a million, our cities would be gone, our machines dust, our knowledge lost. The only things that might endure are the kinds of structures we now puzzle over, the ones built of stone, immense and immovable, resistant to time. Perhaps that is why they were built so large, why they were carved so carefully. Perhaps their builders knew what we have forgotten, that only monuments beyond ordinary human scale can survive the eraser of time. So when we look at the pyramids, or the stones of Baalbek, or the terraces of Yonaguni, we may not just be looking at ancient human achievement. We may be looking at echoes, fragments of something older, shadows of civilizations erased by time, but not entirely forgotten. These structures are not just puzzles for archaeologists. They are messages across time, reminders that the story of intelligence on Earth may be deeper, stranger, and more fragile than we dare to believe. Every culture on Earth, no matter how distant or isolated, carries stories from the past. Myths of gods, great floods, golden ages, and cataclysms that reset the world. Scholars often dismiss these as allegories, symbolic tales meant to explain natural events or teach moral lessons. But what if myths are not just stories? What if they are fragmented memories, echoes of civilizations erased by time, preserved not in stone or metal, but in words and traditions that outlived their creators across continents, across oceans? Peoples who never met and never shared languages still tell tales that sound eerily similar, as though humanity itself is haunted by a collective memory of lost worlds. Take the flood myths, from Mesopotamia to India, from the Americas to Polynesia, from Africa to Scandinavia. Nearly every ancient culture has a story of a great deluge that destroyed civilization and forced survivors to rebuild. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the gods send a flood to cleanse the earth, sparing only Utnapishtim, who builds a boat to survive. In the Bible, Noah receives divine warning and constructs his ark. Hindu texts tell of Manu, saved from a world-consuming flood by a great fish. Native American tribes speak of waters rising to cover mountains, with only a handful surviving. These stories are too widespread to dismiss as coincidence. Mainstream explanations point to local floods during the end of the Ice Age, when glaciers melted and sea levels rose dramatically, but perhaps there is more to it. What if these myths are memories of civilizations drowned when oceans swallowed coastlines and cities tens of thousands of years ago? What if survivors carried their stories forward, retelling them generation after generation until they became the myths we know today? Myths also speak of golden ages, times when gods or advanced beings walked among humans, teaching them agriculture, astronomy, and law. The Greeks told of Kronos and the Titans ruling in a time of peace and abundance. The Egyptians spoke of Zep Tepi, the first time when the gods lived on Earth and founded civilization. The Mayans had their hero twins, divine figures who shaped the world. In nearly every case, these golden ages end abruptly, followed by catastrophe, war, or divine withdrawal. Skeptics interpret these attempts to explain why life is hard now, compared to an imagined past. But another possibility emerges. What if these golden ages were real? Times when earlier civilizations thrived, reaching heights of knowledge we cannot fully grasp. When disaster struck, the survivors may have cast their lost ancestors as gods, beings of impossible power, their technologies remembered as magic. Over time, the truth blurred into myth, but the memory endured. Even more intriguing are the stories of advanced technologies hidden in mythological language. In Hindu texts like the Mahabharata and Ramayana, we find descriptions of Vimanas flying chariots capable of traveling great distances, even into the heavens. The texts described them in mechanical detail: engines, fuel, and battles fought with weapons that burned like the sun, leaving survivors with hair falling out and skin blistered, eerily similar to radiation sickness. To skeptics, these are poetic exaggerations. To others, they are records of technologies so advanced that ancient writers struggled to describe them with the vocabulary they had. What sounds like myth today may once have been fact, remembered in distorted form. The same echoes appear in Native American traditions, where stories speak of sky people who descended to teach and sometimes to punish. In African myths, gods arrive from the heavens bringing fire and knowledge. The Dogon people of Mali possess ancient astronomical knowledge of the Sirius star system that mainstream science claims they should not have known without telescopes. Are these coincidences, or are they cultural memories of encounters with beings, whether human or not, who carried advanced knowledge long before our modern age? If civilizations rose and fell before us, these encounters may not be with aliens from distant planets, but with humans from earlier cycles of history. Survivors of those cycles may have passed fragments of their knowledge to the cultures that followed, sparking myths that endure to this day. Myths also carry warnings, as though ancestors sought to leave behind not just memories but lessons. The story of Atlantis, told by Plato, is the most famous. He described a vast, advanced society destroyed in a single day and night of catastrophe, swallowed by the sea. Scholars often treat it as allegory, a moral tale about hubris. But what if Plato was preserving a real memory, passed down through oral tradition for thousands of years? If Atlantis existed, it may have been one of many civilizations lost to floods and disasters at the end of the Ice Age. Its story endures not just because it is compelling, but because it may be a warning, a reminder of how quickly greatness can be undone. We see this theme repeated in myths across the globe. The Hopi speak of previous worlds destroyed by fire, ice, and water, with humanity reborn each time in a new cycle. The Aztecs believed we live in the fifth sun, with 4 worlds before ours destroyed by cataclysm. Hindu cosmology describes vast cycles of creation and destruction, with entire ages wiped away before new ones begin. These are not isolated stories, they form a global pattern. Everywhere, myths tell us that civilization rises, falls, and is reborn. Whether literal or symbolic, they reflect an understanding that history is not linear but cyclical, a pattern of creation and erasure. And when we look at the geological and fossil records filled with extinction events and resets, the myths align eerily well with science. Perhaps our ancestors knew more than we give them credit for. One of the most haunting aspects of myths is how they preserve details across immense spans of time. Oral traditions, when repeated for generations, can carry memories of real events for tens of thousands of years. Studies have shown that Aboriginal myths in Australia describe coastal flooding events that occurred over 10,000 years ago. Events confirmed by modern geology. If stories can preserve memories for 10,000 years, what else might be remembered in myth, distorted by metaphor but still rooted in truth? Could tales of floods, golden ages, flying machines, and lost cities be the echoes of civilizations erased not just thousands but millions of years ago? The power of myth lies in its persistence. Stone erodes, metal corrodes, cities crumble, but stories endure. They are passed from parent to child, carried across oceans, preserved in song and ritual. Even when languages change, the core of a story can survive. Myths are the vessels through which lost civilizations may have left their greatest legacy. Not machines or monuments, but warnings and memories encoded in tales that seem fantastical to us, yet may be grounded in forgotten truths. So when we read of gods hurling weapons of fire, of worlds drowned in water, of beings who descended from the sky, we should not dismiss them so easily. They may not be literal in the way we imagine, but neither are they mere fantasy. They are the shadows of history, the whispers of civilizations whose bones have turned to dust, but whose memories live on in the only form time could not erase. The myth. And if myths are memories, then they are also maps. Maps that point us back toward the cycles of rise and fall, creation and destruction, reminding us that we are not the first to walk this path, and perhaps not the last. When we look up at the night sky, we are not just staring into space, we are staring into time. Every star is a memory, its light traveling across unimaginable distances, carrying with it the story of a universe far older than us. Civilizations have always looked to the stars for guidance, but what if they left more than inspiration? What if they encoded their knowledge, their warnings, and even their existence into astronomical alignments? Myths and cycles, written not in paper or stone, but in the heavens themselves. Across cultures and continents, the sky has been treated not as a backdrop, but as a record, and when we begin to connect the dots, a picture emerges that suggests civilizations long before us may have marked the cosmos as their canvas. Take the alignments of ancient monuments. The Great Pyramid of Giza is not just an engineering marvel, it is aligned almost perfectly with true north, with an error so small it rivals modern instruments. Scholars claim this was achieved with rudimentary tools, yet the precision is astonishing. The 3 pyramids of Giza are also aligned with the stars of Orion's belt, a pattern mirrored with uncanny accuracy. Across the ocean, the pyramids of Teotihuacan in Mexico align not only with celestial bodies, but with cycles of Venus, a planet that played a central role in Mesoamerican cosmology. Stonehenge in England, the temples of Angkor in Cambodia, and countless other sites around the globe are constructed in perfect harmony with solstices, equinoxes, and star risings. Why this obsession with celestial alignments? Were these cultures simply tracking the sky for agriculture and ritual, or were they preserving knowledge of cosmic cycles that stretched far beyond their own lifetimes? One of the most intriguing cycles is the precession of the equinoxes, a slow wobble in Earth's axis that takes about 26,000 years to complete. This cycle causes the positions of the stars to shift gradually over millennia. Most ancient societies should not have been aware of this, since it requires precise observations over thousands of years. And yet myths and monuments across the world seem to encode knowledge of precession. The ancient Egyptians spoke of a cycle of ages tied to the star. The Mayans constructed calendars of breathtaking accuracy, tracking celestial cycles with precision modern astronomers still marvel at. The Vedic texts of India describe great cycles of time, called yugas, stretching tens of thousands of years, eerily close to astronomical cycles. Could it be that this knowledge was not discovered by these cultures, but inherited from an earlier civilization that tracked the heavens long before recorded history? The sky itself holds clues in its catastrophic events. Every few tens of millions of years, Earth is battered by impacts from comets or asteroids, resetting life's trajectory. Some scientists believe these impacts follow a cycle, possibly tied to the solar system's movement through the galaxy. If earlier civilizations existed, they too would have faced these cosmic cataclysms. They may have mapped them, predicted them, and left warnings encoded in myths and monuments. When ancient stories speak of fire from the sky or gods who cast down stars, are they describing mythological battles or memories of real celestial impacts that destroyed worlds and erased civilizations? Consider the Younger Dryas period, about 12,800 years ago. This was a time of sudden global cooling, likely triggered by a comet impact or massive meltwater floods. Cultures across the world carry myths of fire in the sky, floods that drowned continents, and survivors who rebuilt civilization. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, one of the oldest known megalithic sites, may even encode astronomical events from this era. Some researchers argue that carvings on its pillars depict constellations as they appeared during a cosmic impact, effectively recording the disaster in stone. If true, this means that not only did ancient people witness a cataclysm from the sky, but they preserved the memory through astronomy, ensuring that future generations would know what happened. And if they could do this 12,000 years ago, what else could civilizations millions of years ago have encoded in the stars? Another striking mystery lies in how myths of cosmic cycles mirror astronomical realities. Hindu cosmology speaks of yugas, great ages that repeat endlessly, with each cycle bringing both creation and destruction. The Greeks spoke of the ages of man, each ending in catastrophe before a new one began. The Mayans saw time as cyclical, with world ages ending in floods, fire, and rebirth. Even the Hopi of North America described worlds destroyed by fire, ice, and water, with humanity reborn each time under new skies. These are not just random stories, they reflect an understanding of cosmic cycles of destruction and renewal. It seems far more sophisticated than we give ancient people credit for. Were they simply observing the stars, or were they passing down knowledge from a deeper past? When earlier civilizations had mapped these cycles themselves, astronomy also intersects with another enduring mystery. Why so many ancient cultures built structures that would last for millennia, aligned not just with earthly concerns but with celestial ones? To align a monument with the solstice or a star rising requires not only precision but the intent to preserve that alignment for future generations. These were not temporary markers for planting crops, they were messages, set in stone meant to endure long after their builders were gone. Some alignments even point to dates thousands of years in the past or future, as if to say, remember this moment, it mattered. Could those moments have been cosmic disasters, warnings of cycles that bring destruction? If so, then these monuments are not just temples, they are time capsules, carrying knowledge across ages. The stars themselves hold another possibility. They may be a universal language for civilizations. Stone can crumble, metals can rust, but the constellations remain. Any advanced society would know that the stars shift only slowly over time, making them the perfect reference point. If earlier civilizations wanted to communicate with future ones, the sky would be their canvas. Align a pyramid with Orion, build a temple facing Venus, carve constellations into stone, and you leave behind a map, not just of space but of time. Future civilizations who look up will recognize the same patterns, and if they are curious enough, they may decode the message. In this way, the stars become a bridge between ages, connecting civilizations separated not just by centuries but by millions of years. There is also the haunting idea that some of the anomalies we see in space, unexplained signals, unusual objects, might not be extraterrestrial at all, but remnants of earlier Earth civilizations. If a past society advanced far enough, they may have left satellites, probes, or even signals in orbit or beyond, still drifting in the void long after their creators were gone. To us, these would appear as mysteries of deep space, when in reality they might be echoes of our own planet's forgotten past. In this sense, astronomy is not just about looking outward to alien worlds, but inward, using the cosmos as a mirror to glimpse what might have been. The stars remind us that time is vast, cycles repeat, and civilizations are fragile. We are one small moment in an endless dance, but perhaps not the first. The alignments of monuments, the myths of cosmic fire, the precision of ancient calendars, all of these may be fragments of knowledge inherited from civilizations erased by the passage of time. Whether we recognize it or not, the sky above us is a library, and its pages are filled with warnings, memories, and perhaps even instructions. The question is whether we will learn to read them before the next cycle comes to erase us too. If there is one constant in Earth's history, it is destruction. Catastrophe is woven into the planet's very fabric, from asteroid strikes to volcanic eruptions, from sudden climate shifts to massive floods. The Earth has been shaped and reshaped by forces so violent that entire worlds have been erased in days, sometimes in hours. And if civilizations rose before us, these cataclysms would not have spared them. They would have been obliterated, their cities torn apart, their knowledge buried under layers of ash, ice, or ocean. When we think about the absence of evidence for ancient advanced societies, it is not because such civilizations could not exist. It is because the Earth itself is a destroyer, relentless in its ability to erase the past and start anew. The real mystery is not why we have found so little evidence, but why we expect any to survive at all. Consider the Chicxulub impact. The asteroid strike 66 million years ago that ended the reign of the dinosaurs. A rock the size of a mountain slammed into the Yucatan Peninsula with the force of billions of nuclear bombs, vaporizing everything in its path, sending tsunamis racing across oceans, and filling the sky with dust that blotted out the sun for years. 75% of all species died. Now imagine a civilization existing at that time. In one day, their world would be annihilated. Buildings, technologies, even entire continents could be reduced to rubble. In the aftermath, with ecosystems collapsing, survivors, if any, would struggle to endure. Within centuries, the ruins would be buried. Within millions of years, the geological clock would erase nearly all traces. To future beings, it would appear as though nothing had existed at all. But asteroids are only one weapon in Earth's arsenal. Supervolcanoes have erupted with a force that dwarfs anything humans have experienced. The eruption of the Toba supervolcano about 74,000 years ago nearly wiped out early humans, triggering a volcanic winter that reduced global populations to a fraction of their former size. Go back further, and you find the Siberian Traps eruptions 252 million years ago, which spewed lava across vast swaths of land, releasing enough gases to poison the atmosphere and oceans, driving the Great Dying that extinguished over 90% of species. If civilizations had risen in those times, their fate would have been sealed under mountains of molten rock. How could their knowledge, their monuments, or their machines survive such cataclysm? They couldn't. They would vanish into magma, recycled by the planet itself. Floods are another great eraser. At the end of the last ice age, as glaciers melted, sea levels rose by hundreds of feet, drowning coastlines worldwide. Today, much of human civilization clings to coastlines. If a similar event happened now, cities like New York, Tokyo, and London would disappear beneath the waves. If earlier civilizations built along ancient coasts, their cities are now underwater, hidden beneath layers of sediment and coral. We are only beginning to discover submerged sites like Yonaguni in Japan, and ruins near India's Gulf of Cumbat. If more advanced civilizations existed tens or hundreds of thousands of years ago, Their cities may lie in ocean depths we have barely explored. The sea is not just a grave, it is a vault, keeping secrets hidden where few can reach them. Ice, too, has been a destroyer. Entire continents have been buried beneath sheets miles thick, grinding down landscapes like sandpaper, erasing everything beneath. In Antarctica, under the frozen wasteland, there may be ruins entombed in ice from eras before recorded history. Satellite images sometimes reveal strange geometric patterns beneath the snow, sparking speculation that something older than our civilization could be locked away, waiting to be uncovered as the ice melts. If so, climate change may not only threaten our future, it may reveal fragments of forgotten pasts. Then there are the subtler cataclysms, the ones that unfold slowly but are no less deadly. Shifts in Earth's orbit, solar flares, magnetic reversals, all can disrupt life on a massive scale. Even today, scientists warn that solar storms could cripple our technology, frying satellites, collapsing power grids, and sending us back centuries overnight. If earlier civilizations reached technological heights, they too would have been vulnerable to the whims of the sun and the shifting magnetic field. Their collapse would have left little behind, their machines corroding, their records lost, their memory fading into myth. What makes cataclysms so effective at erasing civilizations is not just their destructive power, but the way Earth recycles itself afterward. Tectonic plates shift, burying ruins in mountains or dragging them beneath the sea. Erosion grinds monuments into dust. Forests reclaim cities. Within thousands of years, almost nothing remains. Within millions, the record is nearly wiped clean. The Earth does not preserve, it renews, and that renewal means the story of any civilization is fleeting, erased to make way for the next. Even human history gives us glimpses of how fragile memory is. The Library of Alexandria, once the greatest repository of knowledge, was destroyed, taking with it countless works of science, philosophy, and history. Entire civilizations like the Olmecs of Mesoamerica or the Indus Valley people are still shrouded in mystery because their records are gone, and this is after only a few thousand years. Scale that to millions, and the problem becomes clear. Without extraordinary preservation, entire civilizations can vanish from memory. This brings us to an unsettling thought. Maybe we are not missing evidence of ancient civilizations because they never existed. Maybe we are missing it because Earth itself ensures that no evidence could survive. Cataclysms are the great equalizer. No matter how advanced a society becomes, it cannot stand against asteroids, supervolcanoes, or floods of planetary scale. The Earth does not discriminate. It erases emperors and peasants, skyscrapers and huts, technologies and myths alike. And if civilizations rose and fell before us, their erasure would be total, leaving behind only anomalies, strange isotopes, out-of-place artifacts, myths of floods and fire. Enough to raise suspicion, but not enough to prove anything. But perhaps that is the greatest clue of all. The fact that myths across cultures speak of floods, fire, and destruction suggests that survivors carried the memory of cataclysms forward. The Hopi tell of worlds destroyed by fire and ice. The Mayans speak of suns that rose and fell, each world ending in catastrophe. The Greeks told of ages wiped away by floods and fire. These are not random stories. They are echoes of real destruction, remembered long after the evidence was gone. If our civilization fell tomorrow, what would survive of our memory? Not the internet, not skyscrapers, not satellites. Perhaps only stories passed down by survivors, fragments of memory distorted into myth. That is exactly what we see in the ancient record. Cataclysms do more than destroy, they reset the clock. They ensure that history is not a straight line, but a cycle of rise and fall, creation and erasure. If we are only the latest in a long series of civilizations, then cataclysms are the reason we cannot see the others clearly. They have been wiped clean, leaving only whispers in stone and story. The Earth itself is the editor, cutting away pages, rewriting the script, starting the cycle anew. And so, when we ask why we have found no undeniable evidence of civilizations before us, we should look not at the lack of ruins, but at the power of cataclysms. The Earth is not a museum, it is a destroyer, and its hand has erased far more than it has preserved. If civilizations before us existed, they did not nightly vanish. They were annihilated, their memory buried beneath oceans, crushed under ice, and burned away by fire from the sky. What remains are the anomalies, the myths, the unexplained signatures that hint at stories we cannot yet read, and perhaps that is all we will ever have. Shadows left behind by civilizations erased by the cataclysms that define our planet. When we talk about archaeology, we often imagine a science that has everything neatly figured out, layers of history catalogued, timelines set, cultures explained. But the truth is far less tidy. Archaeology is full of puzzles, outliers, and anomalies that don't fit the accepted story of human history. These are the hidden mysteries, artifacts found in the wrong place, structures that should not exist, technologies that seem too advanced for their time. Each one is easy to dismiss in isolation, but when you start putting them together, a troubling picture emerges. It suggests that either our understanding of history is incomplete, or there are fragments of civilizations buried so deep in time that they slip through the cracks of what we think we know. Take the case of the Baghdad battery, discovered in Iraq in the 1930s. At first glance, it looks like a simple clay jar, but inside, archaeologists found a copper cylinder and an iron rod, arranged in a way that strongly resembles a primitive galvanic cell. A battery. Replicas filled with acidic liquids like vinegar or grape juice produced small amounts of electricity. If genuine, this artifact suggests that someone in Mesopotamia, over 2,000 years ago, understood enough about chemistry to create electrical devices. Skeptics argue it was simply a storage jar or a coincidence of design. But if it truly functioned as a battery, then what was it powering? What purpose would electricity serve in that age? The official explanation is unsatisfying, leaving us with a mystery that whispers of knowledge misplaced or forgotten. Then there are the so-called out-of-place artifacts that appear in geological contexts far older than humanity itself. Reports from the 19th and early 20th centuries describe objects like nails, hammers, and metallic spheres discovered embedded in coal seams or rock layers, millions of years old. Mainstream science often dismisses these accounts as errors, hoaxes, or misinterpretations, yet they persist, scattered across time and geography, like breadcrumbs leading to a story we're not ready to accept. Even if most are false, the possibility that one or two could be genuine is enough to overturn everything we think we know about history. Imagine finding a hammerhead inside rock dated to the age of dinosaurs. If authentic, it would not just be a mystery, it would be evidence of a civilization that existed in a time we consider impossible. Even more enigmatic are the giant stone spheres scattered across Costa Rica and other parts of Central and South America. Some weigh tons, carved with such perfect roundness that modern techniques struggle to replicate them. The spheres appear in clusters, sometimes aligned with astronomical features, yet their purpose remains unknown. Were they markers, tools, or monuments of some kind? Mainstream archaeology admits their precision is remarkable, but insists they were made with simple tools and patience. Still, the question remains, why would ancient people carve dozens of massive stone balls with such care, unless the practice had some deeper meaning or origin now lost to us? Could they be echoes of tradition inherited from earlier cultures, or even from civilizations that existed long before recorded history? Other mysteries hide in plain sight, like the Nazca lines in Peru. These massive geoglyphs, visible only from above, stretch across desert plains in the form of animals, plants, and geometric patterns. They are so large that their full designs cannot be appreciated by those standing on the ground. How then were they planned and executed with such precision? The official explanation is that they were ritual pathways or offerings to gods, created with simple surveying technique, but the scale and execution suggest something more deliberate, perhaps even astronomical alignments or signals meant to be seen from the sky. Were the Nazca people inspired by something they witnessed, flying craft, celestial events, or were they preserving a tradition inherited from much earlier? Whatever the case, the mystery remains unresolved. We also encounter puzzles in the form of ancient maps. The Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513, includes remarkably accurate depictions of South America's coastline, as well as what some interpret as Antarctica without its ice. How could a map from the early 16th century show geographic knowledge supposedly unknown until centuries later? The map's creator admitted it was compiled from older sources, some far older than his own time. This raises the unsettling possibility that earlier civilizations, perhaps even those predating known history, charted the world in ways we do not yet understand. If true, it suggests a level of exploration and knowledge far beyond what we attribute to early culture. Another perplexing case is the Antikythera mechanism, often called the world's first computer. Discovered in a shipwreck off Greece, It dates to around 100 BCE. The device used complex gears to predict eclipses, track planetary movements, and even calculate the timing of ancient games. Its sophistication stunned scientists. It would not be matched again for at least 1,000 years. The mystery is not just how it was made, but why such advanced technology appears as a single anomaly, with no surviving tradition of similar devices. Did the knowledge to create it simply vanish, lost when civilizations collapsed? If such things can vanish within a millennium, what might have been lost in millions of years? Some mysteries stretch even further back, into deep prehistory. Cave paintings dating back tens of thousands of years depict not just animals but abstract symbols, star patterns, and humanoid figures that some interpret as wearing helmets or carrying strange devices. Mainstream scholars see them as spiritual or ritualistic, but they raise the question, were our ancestors recording encounters with things they could not fully explain? Were these depictions symbolic, or were they memories of contact with advanced beings, whether human, alien, or remnants of earlier cycles of civilization? The hidden mysteries also include sites that defy traditional timelines. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, for instance, is over 11,000 years old, predating agriculture and settled civilizations according to mainstream history. Yet it contains massive stone pillars arranged in circles, carved with intricate symbols and animals. This level of complexity should not exist in a world of hunter-gatherers. It suggests that advanced knowledge of construction, symbolism, and organization existed long before the accepted dawn of civilization. Could Göbekli Tepe be a legacy site, built by survivors of a lost world to preserve memory and ritual in a new age? If so, it is a direct bridge between forgotten civilizations and our own. Even within known civilizations, there are gaps and mysteries that raise questions. The sudden disappearance of the Maya, the collapse of the Indus Valley, the enigma of Easter Island, all remind us how fragile human progress can be and how easily knowledge can be lost. If this can happen in the span of centuries, how much more has been lost in the vast stretches of time before us? The hidden mysteries of archaeology are not just puzzles, they are reminders of how incomplete our story really is. When taken together, these anomalies, out-of-place artifacts, inexplicable structures, mysterious maps, and vanished knowledge form a pattern. They suggest that either humans were far more advanced far earlier than we admit, or that civilizations before ours reached heights we have forgotten. Archaeology does not close the door on these possibilities. If anything, it leaves it slightly ajar, inviting us to look deeper, to question harder, and to wonder what else lies buried beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. And that is the essence of these hidden mysteries. They are not just strange objects in museums or ruins in deserts. They are questions carved into the bones of the earth, whispers from the past that remind us that history is not finished, not certain, and not nearly as complete as we are taught. Each discovery is a clue, a fragment of a story that may stretch back far beyond humanity itself. The challenge is whether we will have the courage to follow those clues even if they lead us to conclusions we are not ready to face. When we think of technology, we imagine it as a linear progression. Stone tools gave way to bronze, bronze to iron, iron to steam, steam to electricity, and finally the digital world we inhabit today. But what if that line is an illusion? What if technology is less of a straight path and more of a cycle, rising to brilliance before collapsing into ruin, leaving only fragments behind? Across history and prehistory, there are echoes of advanced knowledge and engineering that appear far earlier than they should, like ghosts of forgotten ages. These technological echoes are not just curiosities, they are clues that suggest the story of human innovation, or even the story of intelligent life on Earth, may be far older and stranger than we allow ourselves to believe. One of the most famous examples is the Antikythera mechanism, often described as the world's first analog computer, salvaged from a shipwreck off the coast of Greece. It dates to around 100 BCE, yet its complexity rivals that of clockwork mechanisms built over 1,000 years later. Using intricate gears, it could predict eclipses, track planetary movements, and mark the timing of important festivals. How did such a device appear seemingly out of nowhere, only to vanish again for centuries? If technology truly progresses in a neat, upward line, the Antikythera mechanism should not exist. It suggests either that knowledge was far more advanced in the ancient world than mainstream history admits, or that this was a survival of an even older tradition, a technological echo from a time long before Greece. But the echoes don't stop there. In ancient India, the texts known as the Vedas describe flying machines called vimanas, capable of traversing the skies and even the stars. The descriptions include details that sound eerily like modern technology: multi-tiered craft, propulsion systems, and devastating weapons that release blasts resembling nuclear fire. Mainstream scholars interpret these as myths or symbolic allegories, yet the specificity is striking. If these were merely metaphors, why describe machines, engines, and aerial battles in such detail? Could they be cultural memories of technologies that existed in a distant past, filtered through the language of myth? If so, they are not fantasies but technological echoes preserved in story. Ancient Egypt offers its own riddles. The pyramids and temples display engineering precision that continues to baffle researchers. Blocks weighing hundreds of tons were cut, transported, and placed with tolerances so tight that even modern tools struggle to replicate them. Hieroglyphs from the Temple of Dendera depict what some interpret as light bulbs, complete with filaments and cables, while others see helicopters and planes in carvings at Abydos. Skeptics dismiss these as coincidences of art, but the idea persists because the ancient works feel more advanced than their context should allow. Were the Egyptians simply geniuses with stone, or were they inheritors of knowledge passed down from a forgotten technological age? Across the world, other puzzles emerge. The Nazca lines, vast geoglyphs etched into Peru's desert, can only be fully appreciated from the air. How could a people without flight create designs so precise over miles of landscape? Some argue they used simple surveying tools, yet the scale suggests an understanding of perspective and aerial visibility that is difficult to explain without flight itself. Then there are the Moai statues of Easter Island. Massive stone heads moved across the island with methods still debated today. Some theories suggest ropes, others wooden sledges, but the mystery remains why such feats of engineering were attempted at all. Were these projects expressions of cultural strength, or did they serve purposes we no longer understand, possibly echoing techniques or inspirations from earlier technological tradition? Even deeper in the past, we encounter enigmas that are harder to dismiss. All parts out-of-place artifacts are objects found in geological layers that don't match their supposed age. Reports include metallic spheres found in South African mines, grooved with perfect symmetry, dated to billions of years old. Others describe tools, nails, or even machines encased in coal or stone. Most are explained away as natural formations or errors, but even a single genuine example would rewrite history. If a machine part is found in rock millions of years old, it means someone or something had technology long before humans appeared. These could be remnants of earlier civilizations erased by cataclysm, their existence reduced to fragments of metal mistaken for anomalies. The echoes are not always physical. They live in legends too. Nearly every culture has stories of golden ages when knowledge and technology surpassed anything seen later. The Greeks spoke of Atlantis, a civilization that fell because of its hubris, but supposedly possessed technologies far beyond its time. In South America, myths describe gods who arrived with tools of thunder and flight, teaching agriculture, astronomy, and construction. The Dogon people of Africa spoke of the Sirius star system with knowledge that seemed impossible without telescopes. Were these myths simply lucky guesses and exaggerations, or were they echoes of real encounters with advanced knowledge now lost? Some of the most fascinating technological echoes lie in the precision of ancient calendars and astronomical knowledge. The Mayan calendar tracked celestial cycles with accuracy rivaling modern science, predicting eclipses and planetary alignments centuries in advance. The builders of Stonehenge and Newgrange aligned their monuments with solstices, creating calendars carved into stone. The builders of Nabta Playa in Egypt tracked the stars with sophistication thousands of years before the official dawn of astronomy. How did these early people know so much about the heavens? One explanation is simple: genius combined with generations of observation. But another is that they inherited this knowledge from earlier societies, perhaps ones wiped out by floods or disasters, leaving only their data behind. The calendars in this view are echoes of older sciences. Even the industrial era has its mysteries. Reports from the 19th century describe artifacts that seem mechanical, found in context far too ancient for them to exist. In 1851, workers in Massachusetts discovered a bell-shaped vessel embedded in solid rock, dated to hundreds of millions of years old, decorated with intricate patterns. In 1912, The hammer was found encased in stone estimated to be over 100 million years old. These findings are hotly debated, with mainstream scientists attributing them to misidentification or hoaxes, yet they remain part of the lore of technological echoes, reminders that sometimes anomalies slip through the cracks of history and hint at timelines that don't fit our understanding. What makes technological echoes so compelling is not just the artifacts themselves, but the pattern they suggest. Knowledge rises, collapses, and then rises again, each time rediscovered as if for the first time. The Antikythera mechanism appears, disappears, and then centuries later, clockwork re-emerges in Europe. Monumental architecture flourishes, collapses, and reappears across different cultures. Even myths echo each other across continents, repeating themes of flight, fire, and lost golden ages. This cyclical pattern mirrors the cataclysms of Earth itself, suggesting that civilization may not be a one-time event, but a repeating phenomenon. Each age advances, is destroyed, and leaves behind only whispers of its greatness, whispers we interpret as anomalies, when in reality they may be the last fingerprints of forgotten world. The question then is not whether technological echoes exist. They clearly do, but what they mean. Are they evidence of advanced human cultures that rose and fell before recorded history? Are they remnants of civilizations millions of years old, erased by the Earth's cycles? Or are they simply coincidences, misunderstood fragments of a simpler past? The truth may be somewhere in between, but what is certain is this: our story is incomplete. The echoes remind us that we are not the first to dream of progress, not the first to reach for the stars, and perhaps not the first to fall. And if history is truly cyclical, then these echoes are not just curiosities, they are warning. They tell us that no matter how advanced we become, collapse is always possible, and when it comes, we too will leave only fragments for future beings to wonder over. When we think about evidence of civilizations, we tend to imagine stone, metal, or monumental architecture. But the most enduring record of life on Earth is not written in ruins. It is written in DNA. Our genetic code carries a history deeper than any artifact, a record that stretches back billions of years. Every mutation, every adaptation, every anomaly is like a note in the great book of evolution. And as scientists dig deeper into the genetic record, they are finding mysteries that don't fit neatly into the story we've been told. These biological puzzles suggest that the history of life may be far stranger than we imagine, and they raise a chilling possibility. What if DNA itself holds the fingerprints of civilizations long forgotten? At its core, DNA is information, an incredibly sophisticated system of encoding instructions for life. Some researchers have even compared it to a biological computer program. But unlike our fragile digital codes, DNA has endured for billions of years, self-replicating and evolving, carrying forward instructions that no human mind could design from scratch. And yet, when we analyze the human genome, we find anomalies, strange sections of code that don't appear to have a clear function, sequences that look inserted, altered, or spliced in ways that defy simple evolutionary explanation. Mainstream science calls much of this junk DNA, but the name itself reveals our ignorance. What if these regions are not junk at all? What if they are legacies, remnants of biological experiments from the deep past, coded messages left behind by beings who once mastered the language of life? Consider the enigma of human chromosome 2. Unlike other great apes, humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes, not 24. Chromosome 2 appears to be the result of a fusion event, where two ancestral chromosomes merged into one. The strange thing is that this fusion is clean, precise, and remarkably stable, unlike the chaotic rearrangements usually caused by mutations. It raises the question, was this fusion natural, or was it engineered? Some scientists argue that it could be evidence of intentional intervention, a modification that altered the course of human evolution. If true, it suggests that humanity's very identity carries a technological echo, not in stone or metal, but in our blood. Then there are the mysteries of sudden evolutionary leaps. The fossil record shows long stretches of gradual change punctuated by sudden explosions of diversity, like the Cambrian explosion about 540 million years ago, when complex life forms appeared seemingly out of nowhere. Evolutionary theory struggles to explain how so many new body plans and structures emerged in such a short window of time. Could this have been a natural acceleration, or could it reflect an intervention, an infusion of genetic information from a source outside the slow crawl of random mutation. If civilizations before us mastered genetics, they might have left their mark not in artifacts, but in organisms, creating new life forms as experiments, pets, or even tools. And if such creations existed, their legacy would be hidden in the very DNA we study today. Another puzzle is the persistence of anomalies in our own genetic makeup. Around 8% of the human genome is made of endogenous retroviruses, genetic material inserted by ancient viral infections, but some of these sequences appear suspiciously organized, as though they serve regulatory functions rather than being simple leftovers of disease. Were these truly random infections, or could some of them be deliberate insertions, genetic modifications designed to shape human evolution? The idea may sound outrageous, but modern science already uses viral vectors to edit DNA in laboratories. If we can do it now, is it impossible that others could have done it millions of years ago? If so, then humanity may be walking proof of forgotten experiment. The anomalies extend beyond humans. Across the animal kingdom, we see examples of creatures that seem out of place, as though designed with qualities that defy evolutionary logic. The octopus, for instance, has a genetic code so unusual that some scientists half-jokingly call it alien. Its genome is massive, containing an array of unique genes unlike those of any other creature, with extraordinary abilities like rapid camouflage, problem-solving intelligence, and even RNA editing, rewriting its own genetic instructions on the fly. While mainstream science frames this as an evolutionary oddity, others wonder if creatures like the octopus could be remnants of ancient genetic experiments, engineered for purposes we can no longer get. If an earlier civilization once toyed with life itself, some of their creations may have survived extinction events and persisted to our time. Another layer of mystery is found in what anthropologists call missing links. Human evolution is supposed to be a gradual chain, yet the fossil record is filled with sudden gaps. Homo sapiens appear with larger brains and complex culture, seemingly too quickly for natural evolution alone. Where did this leap come from? Some argue it was a result of environmental pressures, but others wonder if it points to something else, perhaps contact or intervention from beings who manipulated our genetic path. The myths of gods who fashioned humans from clay or who breathed life into us may not be simple stories. They could be distorted memories of actual events, when someone or something altered our DNA and set us on a new trajectory. Even stranger are reports of anomalies in ancient skeletons that don't fit established models. Skulls with elongated crania, often explained as intentional deformation, sometimes display features inconsistent with simple binding, such as larger cranial volumes or different suture patterns. Other finds include giant bones or unusually small skeletons that defy expected human variation. Most are controversial and often dismissed, but they fuel speculation that humanity has shared its world with other intelligent lineages, perhaps now extinct, their DNA lingering faintly in our own genomes. The mysteries of DNA also echo in myths of hybrid beings. Ancient stories are filled with chimeras, half-human, half-animal creatures. We dismiss these as symbolic, but in an age where we ourselves are experimenting with genetic splicing, CRISPR and cloning, it's not so hard to imagine that earlier civilizations might have done the same. If they did, their creations may not have survived, but their genetic fingerprints could still be hidden in the DNA of animals that appear strangely unique today. Could legends of centaurs, mermaids, or sphinxes be cultural echoes of actual genetic experiments from forgotten ages? The deeper we look, the more DNA feels less like a blind process and more like a coded system. Francis Crick, one of the discoverers of DNA structure, once speculated about directed panspermia, the idea that life on Earth was seeded deliberately by an advanced intelligence. If he entertained such an idea in the 20th century, what might earlier civilizations have thought as they tinkered with the code of life? Perhaps they saw DNA not just as the foundation of biology, but as a canvas, a medium through which to inscribe their presence across time. Unlike stone or metal which erodes and vanishes, DNA carries information across generations, potentially surviving cataclysms and extinctions. It is the perfect vessel for a civilization determined to leave a mark. And that brings us to the most provocative idea of all. What if humanity itself is the legacy of those civilizations? Not their descendants in culture, but their creation in biology. If earlier beings coded themselves into us, then we are walking monuments to their existence, living records of their mastery. Our intelligence, our creativity, our drive to build and destroy, these may not just be evolutionary accidents, but the echoes of an ancient design. In this view, humanity is not the first civilization, but the continuation of a much older lineage, carrying forward the torch of intelligence through genetic inheritance. The mysteries of DNA and evolution remind us that history is not only written in ruins, but in the very cells of our bodies. The anomalies in our genome, the sudden leaps in evolution, the strange creatures that defy logic, all of these suggest that life's story is not as simple as random chance and gradual change. It may be a story of interventions, experiments, and designs stretching back millions of years. And if that is true, then the ultimate evidence of forgotten civilizations is not buried under rock or ocean. It is inside us, pulsing in every heartbeat, encoded in every strand of DNA, waiting for us to finally recognize it. The ocean is Earth's greatest secret keeper. Covering more than 70% of the planet's surface, it swallows coastlines, mountains, and valleys whole, hiding them beneath layers of saltwater, sand, and coral. While we map the stars above with precision, more than 80% of the seafloor remains unexplored, a darkness in which countless mysteries are buried. If civilizations rose before ours, if great cities thrived in ages now forgotten, then many of them would not be found on land but beneath the waves. The ocean is not just a barrier to exploration, it is a vault, and its doors have been closed for thousands, even millions of years. We know from simple geography that coastlines are impermanent. During the last ice age, sea levels were more than 400 feet lower than they are today. Vast tracts of land, now submerged, would have been dry and habitable. Entire continents of fertile plains and coastal cities could have existed in regions now drowned. When the ice melted, those worlds would have been swallowed by the ocean in a matter of centuries, leaving little behind but scattered ruins. If our civilization were erased tomorrow and sea levels rose again, New York, London, Shanghai, and countless other cities would vanish beneath the waves. In 10,000 years, only divers probing the seabed would find the faintest traces. Why should it be any different for civilizations that may have existed before us? Some discoveries suggest that this might not just be speculation. Off the coast of Japan lies Yonaguni, a massive underwater structure that some claim is a natural formation, while others argue it is a sunken monument. Its terraces, steps, and flat surfaces resemble the work of human hands, though its age is debated. If artificial, it would date back more than 10,000 years, long before conventional history admits the existence of advanced architecture. Similarly, in India's Gulf of Khambat, sonar surveys revealed submerged structures spread across miles, with artifacts dredged from the site suggesting human activity over 9,000 years ago. These finds are controversial, often dismissed or ignored, but they hint at something extraordinary, that the story of civilization may not have begun in Mesopotamia or Egypt, but in cities now buried under the sea. Legends from around the world support this possibility. The story of Atlantis, told by Plato, describes a great civilization that vanished beneath the waves in a single catastrophic day and night. Mainstream scholars treat it as allegory, a parable about hubris, but the persistence of flood myths across cultures cannot be ignored. The Sumerians told of Zu-Sudra, saved from a great flood. The Bible speaks of Noah. The Aztecs, the Hopi, the Polynesians, all carry memories of waters rising, of lands drowned, of survivors rebuilding in the aftermath. These are not isolated stories, they are global. And while floods are common, the idea of entire worlds vanishing beneath the sea suggests something more than myth. It suggests memory. The Indian Ocean holds one of the greatest mysteries of all. Off the coast of Tamil Nadu lies a region known as Kumari Kandam, in legend, said to have been a vast land that once connected India, Madagascar, and Australia. Tamil texts describe it as a cradle of civilization, home to advanced societies long before recorded history. Today, only fragments of this idea survive, but sonar scans and underwater ruins near southern India keep the speculation alive. Could Kumari Kandam have been real? A lost continent swallowed by the sea, taking its people and cities with it? If so, it would mean that much of the human story is missing, erased not by time alone but by the relentless rise of the ocean. Even the Mediterranean, cradle of classical history, hides its secrets. The ruins of ancient cities like Pavlopetri in Greece and Heracleion in Egypt lie beneath shallow waters preserved by submersion. These are relatively recent compared to the timescales we're discussing, Yet they serve as proof that entire cities can disappear beneath the sea, their existence forgotten until rediscovery. If such erasure can occur within a few thousand years, how many civilizations from tens or hundreds of thousands of years ago might lie undetected in the abyss? And then there are the legends of Lemuria, a hypothetical lost continent in the Pacific or Indian Ocean. Originally proposed in the 19th century to explain the distribution of certain animal species, Lemuria has since become a myth of sunken civilizations, advanced knowledge and spiritual wisdom. Though dismissed by science, the persistence of such myths across cultures raises questions. Why do so many traditions separated by oceans speak of lost lands swallowed by the sea? Could these stories be distorted memories of real places, civilizations drowned when coastlines collapsed and seas surged? Science itself acknowledges the violence of oceanic change. The end of the last ice age brought the rapid flooding of continental shelves, an event so sudden and global that it could easily explain the persistence of flood myths. For coastal civilizations, the sea's advance would have been apocalyptic. Towns, farms, and temples would have been swallowed, entire cultures erased in a matter of generations. Survivors would carry stories of the deluge, passing them down through myth, ritual, and song. Over millennia, those stories would transform into legends of gods and floods, but the kernel of truth would remain. And perhaps that kernel is what we hear when we read of Atlantis, Kumari Kandam, or Lemuria, the voices of drowned worlds. Modern exploration has barely scratched the surface of these mysteries. Ocean floors are difficult and expensive to study, and deep-sea ruins are often inaccessible. Yet technology is slowly catching up. Autonomous submarines, sonar mapping, and underwater archaeology are beginning to reveal landscapes that were once dry land. As more is discovered, it becomes harder to ignore the possibility that civilization's true story is not written only on land, but hidden beneath the waves. What we've found so far, Yonaguni, Kambat, Pavlopetri, Heraklion, may be only the beginning. The greatest cities of forgotten ages could be waiting, preserved in the dark silence of the seafloor. The thought is haunting. Imagine a city older than any we know, lying in perfect stillness beneath miles of water, its streets covered in coral, its statues cloaked in algae, its temples home to schools of fish. Imagine descending into that darkness and finding inscriptions, technologies, or artifacts that prove beyond doubt that we are not the first to rise. It would change everything we think we know, not just about history, but about our place in the cycle of civilization. For if others rose and fell before us, then the ocean is both their grave and their museum, holding their memory until we are ready to find it. And maybe that's the point. The ocean is a reminder of fragility. Today, as climate change threatens rising seas, we are facing the same danger that may have erased others before us. Our coastal cities are vulnerable, and if they drown, what evidence of our world will survive for future beings to discover? Skyscrapers will crumble, metal will rust, but perhaps some traces will endure beneath the waves, preserved in the same darkness that hides the secrets of past civilization. The ocean erases, but it also preserves, holding its secrets in silence, waiting for those brave enough to look. The lost civilizations beneath the waves remind us of a sobering truth. History is not secure, and civilization is not eternal. The land we live on today was once seabed, and the land we build upon now may one day be drowned. If there were advanced civilizations before us, their greatest cities are not gone. They are simply hidden, locked away in a watery tomb. And until we unlock those secrets, the true story of Earth's past remains incomplete, a book with its most important chapters still sealed beneath the sea. There is something deeply unsettling about the silence of deep time. The Earth has existed for more than 4.5 billion years, and for most of that time, it has been anything but quiet. Cataclysms have reshaped continents, oceans have risen and fallen, and life itself has emerged, flourished and collapsed in cycles. Yet when we peer back through that vastness, searching for signs of civilizations before ours, the record seems strangely empty. There are hints, whispers, anomalies that refuse to vanish, but no undeniable proof. It is as if time itself conspires to erase the memory of those who might have come before. This silence is not just absence, it is a mystery, one that forces us to confront the limits of what evidence can survive and what traces might remain hidden. The first challenge is the sheer scale of time. Human civilization, from the first city-states to the digital age, spans only about 6,000 years. That is a blink compared to the millions, even billions of years Earth has been alive with activity. In such a vast timeline, whole civilizations could rise, achieve technological mastery, and collapse without leaving a single obvious trace. Mountains would erode, oceans would drown coastlines, tectonic plates would recycle continents into molten rock. Given enough time, even steel, concrete, and glass crumble into dust. The deep time of Earth is not a passive stage, it is a relentless eraser, grinding away the works of any who dare to stand upon it. This helps explain why so little remains. Even our own cities, if abandoned, would vanish faster than we think. Within a few centuries, vegetation would reclaim skyscrapers, bridges would collapse, and roads would break apart. Within tens of thousands of years, almost nothing recognizable would be left. 100 million years from now, it is likely that no trace of humanity would remain on the surface at all. The silence of deep time is not evidence of absence. It is evidence of erasure. If other civilizations existed millions of years ago, their ruins would already be gone, reduced to scattered anomalies that look more like natural oddities than deliberate design. Yet silence is rarely total. Sometimes in the geological record, faint voices break through. Isotopic anomalies hint at unnatural processes, like those seen in uranium deposits, or traces of plutonium that should not exist in nature. Out-of-place artifacts surface in rock layers that seem impossibly old. Myths across cultures echo with memories of floods, fire, and advanced beings. These fragments are not enough to prove, but they are enough to suggest. They are the whispers of deep time, fragile evidence that the silence may not be as complete as it seems. The problem is not whether the evidence exists, it is whether we can recognize it. The search for such evidence forces us to reconsider what we should even look for. If an earlier civilization was truly advanced, they may not have left monuments at all. Our own society is shifting from stone and steel to digital information, fragile formats that could vanish within decades. Future archaeologists might find almost nothing of our world except for traces of radioactive isotopes and chemical pollution in the sediment. In the same way, ancient civilizations may have left their legacies not in stone but in mediums that have long since disappeared. Their greatest achievements might not be pyramids or statues but knowledge coded in ways we no longer understand. The silence of deep time may not be silence at all, it may be a language we have forgotten how to hear. Some scientists have speculated about the Silurian hypothesis, a thought experiment suggesting that if an industrial civilization had existed millions of years ago, its traces would be nearly impossible to detect today. The only things likely to survive would be subtle signatures in the geological record, unusual isotopes, spikes in carbon levels, sudden extinctions. Strangely, Earth's history is full of such anomalies. The end Permian extinction, the Younger Dryas cooling, sudden climate shifts, these could all be natural, but they look eerily like the signatures our own civilization is leaving behind. Fossil fuel burning, nuclear testing, and mass extinction are writing our presence into the rock. Could we be seeing similar signatures from others, misinterpreted as purely natural events? If so, the silence of deep time is not truly silent. It is a chorus of forgotten civilizations, drowned out by the vastness of ages. The challenge is that humans crave certainty. Archaeology and history are built on tangible evidence, tools, bones, inscriptions. Without them, stories of ancient civilizations feel like speculation. But deep time does not preserve certainty. It erases it, leaving only ambiguity. The real question is not whether we can find definitive proof, but whether we can learn to read the silences themselves. A lack of evidence is not evidence of absence. It may simply be the result of time's cruel efficiency. The civilizations before us lasted only tens of thousands of years, as ours has so far. Their window of survival would be too short for geological permanence. The silence of deep time, then, is not denial but inevitability. Yet silence can be deceptive. Think of music. What gives it power is not just the notes, but the spaces between them. Deep time silence may be similar, filled with meaning if we know how to listen. Myths may hold distorted memories of real events. Geological anomalies may encode the fingerprints of lost societies. Submerged ruins may be fragments of cities erased by rising seas. Even our DNA may carry echoes of ancient tampering, preserved through evolution. These are not definitive proofs, but they are patterns, and patterns are rarely accidents. The silence of deep time may simply be the space in which those patterns wait for us to notice them. What is most haunting is the possibility that the silence itself is deliberate. If earlier civilizations foresaw their destruction, they may have chosen not to leave behind monuments or machines, knowing they would only decay. Instead, they may have embedded their warnings in places they knew would endure: stars, myths, or biology. Imagine if DNA itself is a coded message, a genetic monument designed to outlast stone. Imagine if the alignment of monuments like pyramids and henges were not just religious but astronomical signals meant to guide future civilization. The silence of deep time might not be an accident at all. It might be the echo of choices made by those who came before, choices to communicate not with artifacts but with the universe itself. And then there is the possibility that silence is the universal fate of civilizations. Perhaps every intelligent society, no matter how advanced, eventually collapses, leaving behind only faint traces that vanish in the churn of geology. The silence of deep time may not be emptiness. It may be the graveyard of countless worlds, each erased in turn, their memory carried forward only as shadows in myths and anomalies in stone. If so, then our own fate may already be written. One day, humanity too will vanish, and our skyscrapers, satellites, and machines will crumble into nothing. All that will remain will be a thin layer of isotopes and chemicals, another faint whisper in the silence of deep time. But perhaps that is what makes the search for evidence so compelling. We are not just looking for proof of others, we are searching for reassurance about ourselves. If civilizations rose before us and left even the faintest trace, it means we are not alone in the cycle. It means intelligence on Earth is not a rare accident, but a recurring phenomenon, destined to rise again even after destruction. The silence of deep time may frighten us, but it also holds the possibility of connection, of continuity, of a story larger than our own. In the end, the silence is not total. It is punctuated by anomalies, myths and mysteries that refuse to vanish. The challenge is whether we will listen carefully enough to hear them, or whether we will dismiss them until we too are erased, our memory joining theirs in the endless quiet. Deep time does not care what we believe, but perhaps hidden in its silence, the truth of forgotten civilizations is still waiting for us to find it. History, as we're taught, is linear. We're told that humanity crawled from caves to cities, from stone tools to smartphones, climbing step by step up a ladder of progress. But when we step back and look at the broader sweep of time, the pattern that emerges isn't a straight line. It's a cycle. Civilizations rise, they flourish, and then they fall, often spectacularly. They leave behind ruins and myths, sometimes wisdom, but rarely permanence. And what's most haunting about this cycle is not just that it repeats, but that it may have repeated far longer and far deeper into Earth's history than we are willing to admit. If there were civilizations before ours, they too would have risen, reached their peak, and collapsed, their stories erased by the churn of time, leaving only faint echoes to remind us that nothing lasts forever. The cycle is visible even within human history. The Sumerians built cities and invented writing, but their civilization crumbled. The Egyptians raised pyramids that have outlasted empires, yet their dynasties fell to conquest and decline. The Maya developed a complex calendar and cities hidden in the jungle, but their world collapsed in famine and warfare. Rome once ruled the known world, only to disintegrate into fragments. In every case, greatness was temporary hubris. Environmental collapse, war, or natural disaster intervened, and what seemed eternal turned to dust. If this happens in the span of mere thousands of years, what could happen in the span of millions? Whole cycles of rise and fall could unfold and vanish without leaving recognizable traces. The Earth itself enforces the cycle. Civilizations depend on stable climates, fertile land, and relative safety from cataclysm. But Earth is anything but stable. Ice ages advance and retreat. Supervolcanoes erupt without warning. Asteroids crash from the heavens. Oceans rise, consuming coasts, while deserts expand, choking once fertile plains. Each disaster resets the stage, forcing survivors to rebuild from nothing. If earlier civilizations existed, they may have reached extraordinary heights, only to be wiped clean by catastrophe. What we would see today would not be their monuments, but only the aftermath: odd isotopes, strange anomalies, and stories passed down as myths of gods, floods, or fire. But collapse does not always come from outside. Civilizations often destroy themselves. Overpopulation, resource depletion, corruption, and warfare eat away at their foundations until they can no longer sustain themselves. This too is a cycle. When a society expands, it demands more than its environment can provide. When it consumes too much, collapse follows, and the survivors start over, often forgetting the lessons of the past. Even now, our own civilization strains under this same pressure. Climate change, dwindling resources, and political instability threaten to push us toward collapse. If the cycle continues, we too may fall, leaving only fragments for some future intelligence to wander over. The haunting thought is that the cycle may not be unique to humanity. Intelligence itself may be cyclical. Given time, evolution produces minds capable of building civilizations. Those civilizations rise, flourish, and collapse, their traces erased by geology and catastrophe. Millions of years later, new species evolve, and the cycle begins again. We may be only the latest iteration, walking paths once trodden by forgotten beings. This would explain why the silence of deep time is so complete. It is not that no civilizations existed before us, it is that they all succumbed to the same cycle we now face. Each one erased, each one replaced. Myths from across the world echo this idea. The Hindus speak of yugas, great ages that rise and fall, each ending in destruction and renewal. The Hopi tell of worlds destroyed by fire, ice, and flood, with survivors rebuilding anew. The Greeks spoke of the ages of man, each age collapsing before the next arose. The Mayans described suns, each world cycle destroyed by catastrophe before a new one began. These are not random stories, they are patterns. They reflect a worldview in which history is not linear, but cyclical, where collapse is not an accident but an inevitability. Were these cultures simply intuitive, or were they preserving memories of cycles witnessed long before? What makes the cycle so terrifying is how complete it is. Collapse is not just the fall of governments or the loss of cities, it is the loss of memory. Knowledge vanishes when libraries burn, when languages die, when teachers are silenced. Once forgotten, it must be rediscovered, often at great cost. The Antikythera mechanism shows that technology can vanish for centuries, only to be reinvented later, as if for the first time. Stone architecture reappears in cultures separated by thousands of years. Even astronomy, once lost in the Dark Ages, had to be rebuilt from fragments. If we can lose knowledge so easily within recorded history, what might have been lost in prehistory, or in ages erased entirely by time? The cycle also explains the allure of anomalies. Out-of-place artifacts, mysterious ruins, inexplicable myths. These may not be evidence of aliens or miracles, but of earlier cycles of civilization. If humanity itself has forgotten vast chapters of its past, it is no stretch to imagine that whole cycles of intelligence before us have been erased, their remnants buried too deep or too scattered to confirm. We are like amnesiacs, piecing together fragments of memory, sensing that something came before but unable to recall the details. The silence of deep time is not empty. It is simply the space between cycles, a pause before the next rise begins. And here lies the ultimate warning. If the cycle is real, then our own civilization is not permanent. We are not the pinnacle of history. We are one phase in a repeating pattern. Our skyscrapers, our satellites, our digital archives, these feel eternal, but they are fragile. A few centuries of neglect, a single catastrophic event, and all of it could vanish. Within 1,000,000 years, no trace would remain. Future beings might debate whether we ever existed at all, just as we debate the possibility of civilizations before us. Our nuclear isotopes and chemical signatures might be the only whispers of our age, echoes in the rocks for others to puzzle over. But the cycle also offers hope. Collapse is not the end, it is renewal. Every fall clears the ground for a new rise. If intelligence is a recurring phenomenon, then even if we vanish, something else will rise in our place. Civilizations may die, but the pattern endures. Perhaps that is the deeper lesson of myths and anomalies. Not that we are doomed, but that we are part of something larger, an endless rhythm of rise and fall, destruction and rebirth. The cycle is not a tragedy, but a truth. one that binds us to the forgotten past and the unknowable future alike. The question is whether we can break free. Must the cycle always repeat, or can a civilization endure? Can we learn from the faint whispers of those who came before, or are we doomed to forget, to fall, and to leave only shadows behind? The evidence is unclear, but the warning is unmistakable. The cycle of rise and fall is written into myths, into geology itself. It is the rhythm of civilization, the song of deep time, and unless we learn to hear it, we too will dance to its tune, rising high, falling hard and vanishing into silence, just as others may have before us. If the idea of forgotten civilizations teaches us anything, it is that time is merciless, but it also repeats itself. Every fallen empire, every erased culture, every buried anomaly whispers a warning. What exists today can vanish tomorrow, and what feels eternal is anything but. For us living in the present, the lesson is simple but urgent. We cannot assume that our skyscrapers, satellites or digital worlds make us immune to the same forces that may have erased others before us. We are vulnerable, and the very patterns of history, geology and myth suggests that unless we act differently, we may follow the same arc into silence. But perhaps awareness gives us a chance to break the cycle. The first lesson is humility. Humanity has always carried an assumption of uniqueness, the belief that we are the pinnacle of creation or the only civilization ever to walk this earth. Yet, if time is a cycle, and if other civilizations rose and fell before us, then our story is not singular, it is part of something much larger. This recognition should strip us of arrogance. Instead of seeing ourselves as the masters of Earth, we should see ourselves as stewards, temporary caretakers in a long chain of civilizations stretching across time. If others came before and were erased, then our survival is not guaranteed. Humility is not weakness, it is clarity, the ability to recognize that we are fragile in the face of deep time and must act accordingly. The second lesson is awareness of fragility. Civilizations are ecosystems, balancing on resources, climate and social cohesion. History shows us that when balance breaks, collapse follows. Today we face resource exhaustion, environmental degradation, and rising seas, the same challenges that may have brought down civilizations in the past. Our technology blinds us to this fragility, giving us the illusion of control. But the cycle reminds us that even the most advanced societies can fall. The warning is clear. Unless we manage our resources and environment with wisdom, our skyscrapers may one day be ruins beneath the waves, our satellites burned up in the sky, and our story reduced to dust in the geological record. The third lesson is the importance of memory. What destroys civilizations is not just catastrophe, but forgetting. When knowledge is lost, survivors rebuild blindly, repeating mistakes, stumbling through cycles. If others before us fell, it may have been because they failed to preserve their wisdom in ways that could endure the erasure of time. For us, this lesson is critical. Digital memory, while vast, is fragile. Servers fail, formats become obsolete, and even satellites eventually fall. If we want our story, our science, and our warnings to outlast collapse, we must think in terms of permanence. Knowledge must be carved into mediums that endure stone, space, or biology. Myths carry truth across millennia. But perhaps we can do better. Perhaps we can embed our memory into the very fabric of life, or into monuments that will outlast mountains. The cycle warns us that survival without memory is not progress, it is stagnation. The fourth lesson is resilience. If civilizations fall, the survivors matter most. Myths of floods, fire, and collapse exist because people endured, carrying fragments of memory into the next cycle. Today we must ask what resilience looks like in our own age. Is it cities fortified against climate change? Is it technologies designed to work without fragile infrastructures? Or is it a culture that values adaptability over excess, community over conquest? Resilience is not just about surviving catastrophe, it is about carrying wisdom through it, so that collapse becomes not an end, but a transition. If the cycle cannot be stopped, then resilience is the art of surviving within it, ensuring that what follows is not a total erasure but a rebirth. The fifth lesson is foresight. If cycles of rise and fall have played out countless times, then our challenge is to recognize the signs before collapse comes. Every civilization believes itself eternal, yet all of them collapse. The difference between survival and extinction may lie in the ability to see the cycle unfolding and act before it is too late. For us, this means addressing climate change not as a distant problem, but as a present crisis, managing resources not for profit but for sustainability, and building systems of governance that can withstand strain. Foresight means learning from history, myths, and anomalies, recognizing that they are not just curiosities but warnings written in the language of collapse. And perhaps the most profound lesson is perspective. If others came before us and fell, then collapse is not just a tragedy. It is part of a rhythm that may extend across the universe. The cycle of rise and fall may be the fate of all civilizations, whether on Earth or on distant planets. If so, then the meaning of life is not permanence but participation, not conquering time, but contributing to its rhythm. Each civilization adds its verse, and then it fades, leaving the stage for another. The perspective this offers is liberating. We may not be eternal, but we are part of something vast, a cycle that connects us not just to the forgotten past, but to the unknowable future. Yet within this perspective lies an opportunity. Cycles repeat, but they are not inevitable. They are patterns, and patterns can be broken. If we are the first civilization to become aware of the cycle, then perhaps we can be the first to escape it. Awareness is power. If collapse comes from arrogance, fragility, forgetting, and blindness, then the antidotes are humility, resilience, memory, and foresight. By recognizing the lessons of the past, even the faint, disputed traces of civilizations that may have come before, we give ourselves a chance to write a different ending. We may still fall, but we may also endure, not as a cycle, but as a continuity. The haunting silence of deep time is not just a warning, it is a mirror. It shows us what could be lost, what may already have been lost countless times before. But it also challenges us. Will we repeat the cycle, or will we learn from it? Will we vanish into silence, leaving only anomalies for future beings to puzzle over? Or will we carve our memory deep enough into the fabric of earth and sky that our voice endures? The lessons are here, written in myths, in geology, in ruins beneath the sea. All we need is the courage to listen. And maybe that is the final lesson. Awareness is survival. To know that the cycle exists is to stand at a crossroads, one path leading to repetition, the other to renewal. If others before us never saw it, never recognized the signs, then perhaps that is why they fell. But we see it now. We hear the whispers in the silence. We know that the rise always leads to the fall, unless we choose differently. That choice is ours, but time is not on our side. The cycle is turning, and the lesson of forgotten civilizations is clear. Act or be erased. When we step back and look at the sheer scale of Earth's history, our presence feels impossibly small. Civilizations, no matter how great they seem in their prime, are fleeting. Sandcastles built at the edge of an endless ocean. Time has a way of washing everything clean, leaving only scattered fragments for the future to puzzle over. And if there is one haunting truth that emerges from exploring these mysteries, it is this. We may not be the first to build, to dream, to rise to extraordinary heights. Others may have come before us, their stories erased by catastrophe, their memory reduced to whispers and myth, anomalies in stone, and faint scars in the geological record. The silence of deep time is not emptiness, it is the echo of countless forgotten chapters. But within that silence lies both a warning and an invitation. The warning is simple, nothing is guaranteed. The very forces that may have undone others, climate shifts, rising seas, resource exhaustion, and hubris, are the same ones we face today. Our skyscrapers and satellites give us a false sense of permanence, but they are fragile against the relentless tide of time. In 1,000 years, they may be ruins. In 1,000,000, they may be gone altogether. The invitation, however, is more profound. Unlike any who may have come before us, we have a chance to see the cycle. We can recognize the fragility, the patterns of rise and fall, and choose differently. Awareness is our greatest tool, and it is one that forgotten civilizations may never have had. The stories of Atlantis, Lemuria, or Kumarikandam are more than myths. They are mirrors. They remind us that memory survives when monuments fail, that warnings are often hidden in stories carried across generations, and perhaps that is why these tales feel so familiar, so universal. They may not just be allegories, but fragments of real histories, preserved imperfectly but persistently. If that is true, then we owe it to those lost civilizations to listen, to treat their echoes not as fantasy, but as lessons. They may have fallen, but their memory survives to warn us greatness without humility, growth without balance, and power without wisdom all end the same way. And yet, there is hope. Cycles repeat, but patterns can be broken. If intelligence is a recurring phenomenon, then collapse does not have to be the only outcome. By embracing humility, resilience, memory, and foresight, we may be able to step outside the rhythm that has governed civilizations before us. We may endure where others vanished, leaving not just ruins, but a legacy that survives the silence of deep time. The question is whether we will choose that path, or whether we will continue to march blindly into the same fate that swallowed those who came before. So the next time you hear of an anomaly buried in rock, a ruin beneath the waves, or a myth of gods and floods, remember these may not just be curiosities, but echoes of the past reaching out to us. They remind us that we are part of something far larger, a story not of one civilization but of many, unfolding across millions of years. And while we may never know the full truth of those who came before, their greatest gift may be the warning they left behind. The choice is ours to heed it, or to become just another whisper in the silence, waiting for future minds to wonder if we ever truly existed at all.